Hello, and welcome to the Full Advisor Coaching Podcast with Kristin Harrod. Kristin, it is a delight to be with you again. I'm especially happy to be here to talk about the topic that you have on the table today.
Oh, well, thanks, Bill. Yes, this one is one that comes up time and time again. So I'm excited to get into the detail. And it's really kind of taking what we talked about the last time you and I chatted, where we talked about the 7 elements of the fulfillment framework. That wasn't the last time. A couple times ago.
Back, right?
Early. I think it was episode 26. We talked about that. And, it's taking that framework and kind of bringing some of those ideas to life and how they might apply if you're a business leader, a firm leader, and you're looking at your RIA or your financial advisory firm and you're saying, okay, how might I use some of these concepts in my business? And the topic that keeps coming up is how is it, one of the things that happens, I'm working with advisors where they have kind of an established firm, right? And they've built up, they might have been in business 30 years, 40 years, having the founder who was like the real go-getter, rainmaker, all of the things we've talked about at various points where, they're out there hustling and developing business and making the cold calls and networking like crazy. And now they're looking at that second or next generation of advisors and thinking, okay, we've grown, we've hustled, we've gotten to a certain point. And in many cases, these firms start expanding because they acquire other firms and they're integrating different types of advisors, different backgrounds. They have their own people they've organically brought up in the organization. And you kind of get to a point where it's like, all right, we haven't really taught the next generation how to do business development. And we have varying approaches and aspects, and we really want to unify the brand message as well. So what do we do? And so that's what I want to talk about today is kind of an approach for some of these larger firms, the enterprise firms, if you will, that have, billions of dollars under management, and how they can go about teaching and training advisors. And then smaller firms, if you're listening, you can still apply these same concepts. It's just sometimes the resource that you put behind may slow a bit in that it does take a fair amount of resource to get these things sorted, but the same concepts and strategies apply. So, whether you need to train 2 advisors or 10, the concepts are here. It's just you may have more resources the larger your firm gets to be able to do these faster.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting that you bring this point up because sometimes I think that firms think that the training is just, sort of inherent. It just sort of happens because you've got everybody in a room together and they all learn, as it were,
Right.
And that's just not the case. This isn't like genetics. This is not something that absolutely gets passed down. This is, we're talking about we're talking about a brand. We're talking about a culture within the firm. And, in all honesty, some of the younger financial advisors probably are really leery about this cold calling or sales aspect of of business development. So, yeah.
It's interesting. I just had that conversation with an RA leader I talked to the other day. They were talking to me about my fractional CMO work that I do, chief marketing officer work that I will do with larger companies. And one of the things he said to me is like, I want to hire a CMO because I really want to focus on building a marketing-driven organization. I don't want my advisors to feel the stress of having to do the calling and the sales-driven high-pressure work that, he's known or that have been brought up in the industry. So I was talking with this CEO of a firm, and we were talking about what it would take to really strengthen the marketing or growth engine of the firm if you're not relying on any individual advisor like one might have been in years past, where it was very siloed, right? Like advisors had their individual books of business, and it was all about like getting your book of business with your clients, and it was highly sales driven. And I'm not saying that can't happen today and there isn't a place for it,
Right.
but you have to keep in mind that not only do we have the element of the sales piece and all of that, you have to remember not only are advisors different, clients are different. And I think we've talked about this before, where it's like modern clients are definitely more skeptical.
Yeah.
They are definitely, we've had too many situations of, fraud, bribery, money stolen, Ponzi schemes, all of those things we don't want to think about. They're definitely more skeptical. They have tons of information available to them. They have a myriad options to pick from. So there's lots of things competing there. And so we really want to think about, if you're going to build this marketing driven organization that solidifies a brand, then, how is it that you can involve your advisors to reinforce all of that you put in place?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, everybody talks about the changes that technology has wrought, right? Everybody goes, well, one of the changes that doesn't get talked about so much is that technology's opened up the world to everybody. And
Right.
Everybody can go out there and they can see things, as it were, that they couldn't see before. And they now are wiser. And you're right, probably a little more skeptical. And they have a different kind of expectation as clients when they sit down to talk with someone. You would know this better than me. I observe it and see it from the people I speak with.
Right. No, absolutely. They definitely have a different expectation, and it takes longer to build that trust for sure. So we have that element. We have to think about, okay, advisors are different today. For a lot of people who are getting into the field are not just getting in because they came from a salesy background or they
Right.
had that upbringing, right? So they're coming in perhaps more as a technician or someone who understands the planning elements, and they're moving through the ranks and achieving levels of leadership where it's like, okay, now I might be brought in to do business development, kind of like it or not. And then there's also how do you create value in your firm as enterprise value or standalone value? And one of the things you can do is to show that you consistently have a growth engine in place where you're bringing in marketing leads separate from any specific individual, right? So if you're building that really strong brand and you have a consistent flow of leads coming in by the sort of aggregate of everyone and all of the efforts, it increases the value of your firm. And I'm thinking I might have to do an interview with someone who does valuation of firms, because that is something that I've heard a few great interviews on this topic in our industry, and if I can, I'll try to link to those in the show notes. But otherwise, hopefully we can bring someone in. But one of the things that really matters is the ability to have a consistent flow of leads or a growth engine that, again, is not reliant on the founder or not reliant on a specific individual.
Well, how do you do that?
Well, yeah. So let's get into that. So the thing that and I like to start with, and what we've probably touched on before, but it kind of comes from it came from the 7 steps of the fulfillment framework, was having clarity, right? Clarity around your brand strategy, who you are, what you value, what you care about, and we talked about it both on the personal and the firm level. So we're going to focus on the firm side of things, which is, what are the firm values? And then what are the personality, the positioning, and the client profile that make up what we call the brand strategy, right? So we kind of weave all those things together to create this identity for the company and have that as the overarching umbrella. And then with that umbrella in place and clarity around, who do we want to attract in? What is our unique? What makes us unique? And what problems do we solve? And in what manner do we communicate That's really shaping the brand messaging from which any individual advisor who you're asking to do business development can kind of fit their style within that constraint of the umbrella, right? Like they have to be under the umbrella, but they can move around in different spots as long as they're fitting in that. So we'll get into that in a second. So that's a key foundational element that you have to have. Another thing the leadership team of a RIA or a firm should be looking at is what is the client journey that you've outlined. And we talked about the client journey also kind of in the fulfillment framework. And when we talk about the business development ecosystem, which we talked about way back in an early episode that we can link to, but just the idea of looking to say, what are the steps that a client goes through from the time they first find out about you all the way through to the point where they might refer a friend, right? So they've been a loyal client for years. And we talk about that client journey. And so it's really important that the leadership team defines what is our proprietary client journey. And if we can, we could even brand it. That would be even better to brand that process and say, hey, this is our successful client journey TM, like kind of like naming it like, oh, the freedom framework or something like that,
right.
Like where you have your system that you're marketing and sharing. And the reason this matters is because it really helps an advisor communicate what a client could expect from the journey. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sitting here, are you recommending, just so I'm clear, that when people come up with this sort of proprietary client journey, that they give it a name for branding and marketing purposes, or just for clarity?
Well, for both, but definitely for branding and marketing to set you aside, like to set you out from the competition, be like, hey, we have this proprietary process that we use and we have named it. Like I have the fulfillment framework. Like what is the name of the process? So the thing it does is it reinforces confidence that there is a process and that the person can see where they fit along the journey. Yeah. And that way you can kind of break it down into steps. And they can go, oh, I get it. Okay. And when you name it, yes, it is a bit of marketing, but it also kind of gets everybody saying the same thing in the same way. So when you're working on trying to teach and train your advisors to sit down across the table from a prospective client or on a Zoom call and pull up the sort of map of the client journey, they can speak to it and it's, named and there's steps called out. And so I do usually, in fact, always encourage leaders to develop kind of just a one-page overview of the client journey that shows this process for prospects. When you're sitting down, it really does help demystify what to expect coming in. I think we've talked about this too, Bill, when we said...
This sounds really familiar. I'm trying to remember where it was, but yes, we have spoken about this before.
Yeah, just like overall, and it gets into lead to client conversion, the process on that, when we kind of broke down how do you follow up after each meeting and what do you share. One of the key things in having someone in that initial consultation meeting is helping someone understand and feel confident. And when they see a process, they feel confident. When they come in and they've never worked with an advisor before, or they maybe only had someone manage their money and they're unfamiliar with maybe your planning process, this shows them, oh, I see, we're going to have this meeting and then we'll have another meeting. And then you're going to meet with me in 6 weeks. And then I see you every 6 months and I see this is how it works. And so you can show that process so people feel confident, secure. They're no longer questioning what could be next. They're like going, okay, I see what's next. And then they can answer other questions. And that really makes the conversation for the more, the greener business development advisors who aren't quite as comfortable. Yeah. It's a crutch, a tool, but it's also in value for the client.
Well, yeah, and to do that, I think this probably takes you to a point you're about to get to, is you as the leadership are going to have to provide tools and resources to
right.
your
And this
staff.
is one of the fundamental ones, which is like, okay, we all know that there's a journey the client goes on, but if you put together a one-page document that shows it, that's giving a client something an advisor something to work with in speaking with a client. And other things you can do is like put that together into if you happen to use some sort of presentation deck, you can do talking points for advisors, because sometimes we just get tripped up. And I highly recommend doing role play conversations, like acting out what is it like to sit down in a meeting with a prospect, have that conversation. That's something that when I'm coaching a team of advisors, we'll do that. We'll have one person be a prospective client, and another person being the advisor. And it's like, what is the conversation? How do we, what are the talking points we can use? And so how can we take practice in those situations? It makes a big difference.
Practice was the word in my mind. I was thinking, this is practice. You want to practice?
Yeah, and it's not. I remember when I had my RAA, I had my one-page overview that kind of had all the questions that we tend to answer for clients. So it kind of, one side showed all the pain points, the other side showed the meeting process, and I used that like a crutch, because for a long time I was terrified to ever ask for the sale. So I would be like pulling that out and be like, let me just it was almost like my agenda, right? Like I would just step through it and be like, okay, just follow the words on the page. And then I got really good at it, and I could just do it without even looking at it. I could, talk extemporaneously, but I had the talking points down. But when you can give someone, an advisor, the tools that they can use, it makes a big difference to help facilitate that conversation. And it keeps the brand consistent too, because you're making sure everybody's saying similar things.
Yeah, and that leads me into this question, because we're talking about a process, we're talking about a journey, but if you and I are doing that journey and sharing it together and talking to clients, you're going to be very different about it than I am. So you're not suggesting that one of us has to be like the other, are you?
Right. We're not going to all dress in the same uniform, and then, I think of, I'm like, it's like, Anne, would you like fries with that? Thank you so much for coming in. I picture that. And some things many times you want to know, you want that consistency, which is great. But no, this is business development. This is a relationship business, relationship marketing. The last episode 27, I did an interview with Bill Cates, who does a lot on relationship marketing, and he and I spent a lot of time talking about that. And it is a relationship business, right? But it's also, not all clients are the same. Not all advisors are the same. It's not one size fits all. But we do want to have these the fundamentals in place. Like I said, the brand strategy, the client journey, the things that are the same, that the client and the advisor can both count on, right? Yeah. We have the things that are fundamental to the business that make them who they are. And then the advisor, understanding all of that, can then focus their business development activities on what fits their strengths or their interests, their personality. Some people, the thought of going out to a networking event to try to, meet people makes them, want to cower in the corner and hide under their desk. And so we don't want to push people into that, because there's many people, someone like that may be very comfortable recording a podcast episode, or writing a blog post, or being interviewed or asked one-to-one, like, can you explain this topic to me? And then we record that, and that becomes content. They may need a different way. There are other people who are like, get me in front of an audience. I want to be doing presentations. I want to be shaking hands. I want to be out and about. So we really do want to, have an array of potential opportunities. And this is, again, where coaching can come in, because, I'll start when I'm working with people, and I know other coaches who have done this, like, you really just start to say, okay, Bill, what makes you comfortable? And then if you can have the whole group on the call, which is how we work, like, then you can say, all right, what have we found that works? And is that something that you want to try on or not try on, or here's, again, this is where the leadership comes in. Like, we could say, hey, we are going to facilitate a podcast at the corporate level. We have, a host, and then we're going to rotate in advisors who are interested to bring them in to get different voices. I've seen that done well. I've seen where you have right now I'm working with a firm that they have their blog content, and they are encouraging any of the team members, not even just advisors, but other team members across the organization, to contribute content that they think that is relevant to the brand. And so they'll submit it to the marketing team, which is right now me, and because I'm a CMO there, and I'm helping them get these processes in place.
Right.
But we'll look at that and we'll say, okay, here's the content. Now let's shift it so that it's speaking to the target audience in the personality or vibe that we want. But the actual technical content is there from the advisor, and we're putting their name on it, and we're shining the light on them. But, because they're excited about this. And then we're just sort of, I'm educating and helping them see how we can shift it to fit the brand. But we really want to get, the key from the leadership is to enable advisors to sort of stand in their strengths, right?
Yes.
Whether they're introverted, extroverted, whatever their personality profile may be. And there's a battery of tests you can take. If you remember Caleb's episode, I think it was episode 24, where he was talking about, the Colby scores.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's all kinds of things you can do to understand, but ultimately just asking them, what are you interested in? What are you excited about? Are they wanting to do videos? If they are, do you have the facility set up for them to make it really easy to sit down and record a video? I just talked to another client I had worked with a few years ago, and she said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe it. We're setting up a whole video room with a green screen and a camera, and we're getting video coaching. So someone can come in and teach our advisors how to do coaching." So those are the kinds of things, like at the corporate level, are you investing in helping your advisors succeed to be able to reinforce the corporate brand, and then getting them engaged in the way that makes sense for them? So,
well, I have a question, because how do you evaluate all of these opportunities? Let's assume that you've been very successful in, encouraging interaction and getting these advisors and, to get involved and say, and start presenting these opportunities. Obviously some are going to work and some aren't going to work. So what's the criteria in terms of evaluating those?
Well, I think it's really important to get a sense from your advisory team, just first and foremost, what are they interested in and what's energy? And we have to prioritize. This gets back to that business development ecosystem. Like, what are the priorities for the organization, right? Which are the things that we can get faster results from? Which ones fit in the budget? Which ones do we think we could get the return on investment from? Importantly, when we look at resources required, we have to make sure we don't make it too disparate, right? So we do need the strategy to be like, okay, as a firm, we are going to, if you're going to say run a podcast and involve the various advisors, we don't want to be doing that and then dabbling over in a blog and dabbling on, we'll do a radio spot over here and maybe someone else can jump out there. We do want to have a cohesive strategy around it. Get a sense from the team who wants to do what. Might we engage in endeavors, but how do we also streamline it so that we're doing a few initiatives really well and aligning the right advisors to the right initiatives. So it does definitely take a conversation from leadership to the advisor team. So they can't be in a vacuum, right? They have to have dialogue and conversation, but there ultimately need to be priorities so that we're getting enough momentum behind any single endeavor.
No, makes total sense. Makes total sense. Somewhere in there, I'm curious because you haven't gotten to this yet, and I'm curious because I would imagine the leadership, the senior leadership, is going to be looking at this, and I think probably one of the questions they have on their mind, and I know I understand this part, is where's my return on investment? Where do I realize my ROI? Does this fit? Does this give me what I'm looking for? That's got to be a question, right?
Right. And I think, it all depends on the organization and what their measurements are, the KPIs. What is it that they think is the most important thing to measure? And what does it look like? I mean, ultimately, we want to look at, how are the efforts that we're doing to improve business development? How is that moving the needle in terms of the types of clients we're bringing in? What kinds of conversations are we having? Are we able to attract in right fit clients so that we're having more of the prospects convert to clients? And what does that look like? So we're going to definitely look at all of that. I think that's, again, the leadership team needs to be on board around which initiatives are we going to prioritize? How are we going to provide the tools and templates and resources to set our team up for success? How are we going to coach and train our advisors so that they are feeling comfortable in the system that we've set up? How do we have clarity? Do we have clarity on where we're going? And then what are the daily actions or weekly actions that we're asking the advisors to engage in, right? Is it that the company itself is going to be generating the leads and spreading them out across the advisors? Or is it that individual advisors need to be doing efforts to generate, names and leads coming in? Or what is it? What are the actions you want someone to take every day so they know where to focus? And I think that is a key piece that we often overlook, to say, okay, well, at the end of the quarter, did we get more money in? But it's really like, isn't the measurement more around, have we put out X number of blog posts? Did you make X number of calls? What is the number of people who are in the prospect funnel now who are a good fit for our organization? Like deciding those types of things.
Yeah.
And I think before the call we started, Bill, we were chatting a little bit about this, right? Like around how do you know what, every day, you're not going to always feel like business development. And I think it's important that leadership sets the tone for advisors to be like, you know what, we get it. You're not always going to want to. So let's really hone in on what those actions are that you need to be doing and try to carve out the best time of day where you can focus on them. Set yourself up for the best chance of success. And sometimes you just know that, you know what? You got to do the work anyway.
I was going to say, sometimes you just have to show up.
Yes, exactly. But the thing that I think at leadership, it does go on their shoulders to know, to acknowledge when people do have a win in the business development arena, because it's hard. As someone who also has to do my own business development, it is hard to do, right? In a service business that is a longer nurture thing, it's, you want to make sure you're calling out what are the challenges, what are the obstacles, talking with the team, making sure people feel okay that they took a swing and failed, like how is it that you're helping them out? And then how are you celebrating them or sharing whatever's been working to inspire the team? And that's another place where, like in the coaching, I love to bring together, invite the leadership into the coaching. While I'm meeting with the advisors more frequently, to invite the leadership in and acknowledge these advisors kind of in front of them and be like, hey, this is the celebration. Here's the transformation. Here's the growth we've seen from this particular, these advisors and what they've been able to do. Or here are things we've seen that worked really well. Or here's some risks we took that didn't quite pan out, but now we know and we've shifted to this other direction. So we really want the leadership to reinforce that the actions these advisors take. And as we learn and go, the things they're doing are achievable and that they're not overwhelmed, but they feel like this is something I can take on and do and fit into my role without feeling, stressed out about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're touching on a topic that for me is just a strong passion for me, which is the nature of the leadership, because none of this happens without good leadership. Kristin can go in and do all of the work, and you can work with all of the managers, and the advisors can get all of the buy-in. But you do need that leadership component, don't you?
Yeah, and you need someone who's open to, also has that growth mindset and open to learning and knowing that not everyone's going to do things the same way you might do them. So that is key and can be hard because you're like, just do it my way. It works. And then you're like, okay, it works for you. It may not work for me. And so how do we have those conversations and make that happen? And another theme that we've always come up with, like not everything's gonna be perfect, but it's about iterative progress, right?
Yes.
Like how are we making small changes along the way to move forward in the right direction? And we're not looking for sweeping change. We're looking for iterative progress, which I think is a great I love that concept. And it's just more manageable than thinking, oh my God, I've got to suddenly start doing things a whole different way. No, we just need to start pointing in the right direction and stepping that way.
Instead, one step, that's literally where all the cliches come from. One step at a time, one foot in the other. And all of those cliches come out of fundamental truth. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be a big blinding light in the middle of the desert. You just need to keep making the progress.
Exactly. So hopefully people are inspired from today. Again, it's about first making the decision that you really want to set your firm and your advisors up for success in this arena.
That's excellent. That is excellent. So, as we approach the end of this, what should people do? How can they reach out to you to have maybe another conversation about this if they're interested in sitting down and talking to you about maybe leading some of this change in their organizations?
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely love to talk to the RIA leaders or firm leaders who are interested in, getting a brand message that's on the same page, on figuring out how to help train the advisors. You can easily go to my website, click the request a call button. It's in the upper right-hand corner. I'm super excited to sit down and chat with anyone. I love talking about this concept. I like helping to give input and guidance on where you can go. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message through there. I'm out there all the time, so send me a note there. I'm happy to respond. And otherwise, just check out the Full Advisor Coaching website at fulladvisorcoaching.com. And you can peruse around there and take a look. And again, schedule a call if you're ready to talk.
Excellent. The other thing you can do, folks, if you have not done so already, is subscribe to the podcast. And that's pretty easy. Hit the follow button. Done. That way, every time Kristin has a new episode, you're notified. You don't have to guess when or where or how or any of that other stuff. You're just notified and you can give it a listen. The other thing I would ask, if you like the podcast, could you please tell people about it? Share it with other people. Rate it. Give it a good rating, because word of mouth promotion is fundamentally profound and key, especially in this world where, as we talked about earlier, everything's open to everybody and we're all skeptical about, is that a bot recommending something to me as opposed to a person? So please do share it. On behalf of Kristin and everybody at Full Advisor Coaching, I'm Bill Tucker. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And remember this, you can go out today and make today a great day or not. The choice is yours. Until next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Full Advisor Coaching, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the follow button so you'll never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can become a part of the Full Advisor community, visit fulladvisorcoaching.com. Remember, stay connected and get notified as soon as brand new episodes release. Click the follow button now. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Kristin Harrod or Full Advisor Coaching.